Alright guys, we are going to be reacting to German Special Forces in Afghanistan, May 2013. Make sure you guys subscribe to my channel. Let's jump in.
Final bearing 337. 26 knots down the angle. 4063 interval is a Rhino at 5. Good. 207 on flat path on course 1 mile. Good. 207 on flat path on.
In December 2001, 2 months after the commencement of operations in Afghanistan, the German military deployed a contingent of 100 operators from the Kommando Spezialkräfte, or more commonly known as the KSK, the Special Forces unit of the German Army. On its arrival in the country in January of 2002, the detachment came under the command of the US-led Task Force k.s.k, a multinational Special Forces task force that was operating in southern Afghanistan. After serving with k.s.k for a few months, the KSK then switched its focus in mid-2002 to supporting German and coalition forces in the Afghan capital city of Kabul, before unfortunately it becomes slightly harder to follow the taskings of the unit, as sources conflict with each other on whether it's completely withdrawn from Afghanistan at the end of 2002, or if the KSK maintained a small presence in the country throughout 2003 and 2004. What is known, however, is that from mid-2005 to 2014, the latter date marking the end of NATO combat operations in the theatre, the KSK not only increased its presence in the country, but also began to ramp up its operations against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, particularly in the north where the bulk of the German forces were deployed. One of its first missions during this period took place sometime in late 2005 and saw the KSK working alongside the US 3rd Special Forces Group to take down or clear an undisclosed target, during which one of the German operators was wounded as a result of an IED explosion. Other missions included a raid against an Al-Qaeda bomb-making house in Kabul in October of 2006, and a heli-borne assault against a Taliban meeting in Baghlan province on the 12th of October 2012 that was codenamed Operation Moonlight and led to the capture of 17 senior Taliban officials, among them the orchestrator of an IED attack against German troops on the 2nd of June 2011. However, none of these operations carried out in the late 2000s and early 2010s would impact or shape the KSK as much as the one conducted on the 4th of May 2013. At 1700 on that spring day, a detachment of Afghan policemen were conducting a routine security patrol near the village of Zaman Kil in the north of Baghlan province, when they were ambushed by a numerically superior Taliban force that was entrenched in a nearby wooded area. Pinned down by the enemy fire, the Afghans radioed for reinforcements, with a 17-man team from the KSK being mobilised from Forward Operating Base Kila Gai. Arriving in the vicinity of the ambush location, the 17-man team moved forward and linked up with their Afghan counterparts, who, instead of assisting the German operators in neutralising the enemy threat, began to disengage from the contact and flee from the area, with reports stating that the policemen established a new position approximately a kilometre away from where they watched the battle unfold. This incident sparked anger throughout the German military, with senior German defence officials in the aftermath questioning the future of the relationship between the German and Afghan forces, whilst one member of the KSK stated that they, the Afghan policemen, were cowardly and let us down. Nonetheless, the men of the KSK didn't have time to assess what was happening, and were forced to seek whatever cover they could find as the Taliban insurgents switched their focus to the German troops. Despite returning fire, it quickly became clear to the German operators that they were not only outnumbered but also outgunned, as the enemy fighters brought into action heavy caliber machine guns and rocket launchers. Realising this, the operators called for immediate air support, which initially came in the form of 2 German Tiger helicopters which launched their onboard rockets into the forest, before being replaced by a similar number of US attack helicopters, and later 2 US A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft, which bombed and strafed the enemy strongpoint.
Jesus Christ. What the hell is that?
The weight of this aerial bombardment was effectively
aircraft.
silencing the enemy gunfire, providing the 17-man KSK team a short period of respite to gather their bearings and take hold of the situation. Eventually, with the fighting having died down, the decision was made to send a 4-man patrol forward to the forest to gather intelligence from the contact and to be certain that the enemy was neutralised. However, as the small team reached the edge of the wooded area, a Taliban fighter who was hunkered down in his foxhole opened fire with his AK-47, hitting Hotfeld Weeble Daniel Wirt before training his rifle into one of the other operators who was struck by a bullet to his helmet and knocked off his feet. Luckily, the bullet failed to pierce the ballistic material of the helmet, and the second soldier was fortunate to walk away from the incident with only minor wounds to his head. Meanwhile, the 2 other operators of the patrol engaged and killed the Taliban fighter, prior to rushing to the assistance of their wounded colleagues and pulling them back to the safety of the rest of the KSK team, who were laying down cover and fire as a dozen more Taliban insurgents emerged from their dugouts and engaged the German troops. Subsequently, over the course of the next hour, the German Special Forces, despite becoming dangerously low on ammunition, fought off a numerically superior Taliban force, causing an unknown number of enemy casualties, until a couple of US Army helicopters arrived to evacuate them from the region. On seeing the American aircraft, the German troops, several of whom were carrying the 2 wounded operators, began to disengage from the firefight and make their way to the landing zone, where they boarded the helicopters, all the while under constant enemy observation, and were extracted back to Forward Operating Base k.s.k. Upon touching down at the base, the wounded were rushed to a nearby aid post, where, sadly, despite the best efforts by the medics to save his life, Hotfeld Weeble Daniel Wirtz was pronounced as killed in action in the evening of the 4th of May,
Damn,
2013.
man. Yeah. That is actually very sad. That's very sad. The passing of Alfred Bebel Daniel Wirtz marks the first time that a member of the Kommando Spezialkräfte had fallen in combat in the unit's history. Wow. So that's actually a huge deal. Huge deal. Oh, man. An investigation into the 4th May incident speculate that the Afghan policeman had connection with the Taliban, although it has never been confirmed. Well, it's most likely what happened. In memory of Albert Bebel Daniel Wood. Damn, bro. That is so sad. Whether here or in Afghanistan, we are with Daniel and his relatives on this day will be never forget. Jesus, man, that is so sad. And at the same time, it's sad. You have to recognize that that's the reality, right? That's the reality of military combat. I mean, I don't know how Russia does it, guys. I mean, I'm telling you, I don't know how Russia and Ukraine do it, where there are basically over 1.5 million soldiers already lost in that battle. I don't know how they have it hard to just see these people just being deleted. I don't know how they do it. I don't have the heart to just watch it happening. Also, something else that I noticed, I watched this documentary, and I told you guys this before. It's called the Russian War documentary. I think it's 2 hours long. And it's sad to see some of these Russian soldiers being kind of left out in so many ways. I mean, I don't know, man. It's a weird way of... There's some countries, that's how they handle their military, right? And there's some other countries that are more conservative. Right, and they try not to lose so many soldiers, but countries like Russia, that's how they do. That's how they confront conflict. They're willing to just send their soldiers, and as long as they're gaining ground, I think they're okay with that. But in the case of the Western world, it's a little bit more different. We don't want to lose our soldiers. I like to think that we don't want that. I don't know. It's like a mixed feeling. I don't know. It's so weird, man. It's very weird, but that's the reality. That's the reality. Let me know what you guys think, guys. I will see you next one now.